What is the most common flop that you'll ever see in poker? It is ace high boards. In fact, almost 60% of all flops contain an ace. And yet this is where I see players lighting money on fire more than anywhere else. Not because the spot is complex, but because they think it's simple. Most players see an ace on the flop and immediately think,
oh, this board must favor the aggressor. Oh, they have all the ace king, ace queen, ace jack, so it must be an easy c-bet.
right? Wrong. When I first started moving up the stakes, this was one of the biggest leaks in my game. Not only was my reasoning flawed, but because ace high boards happen so often, I was repeating the same mistake over and over again. Finally c-bet ace high boards without an ace, get to the turn and river, and suddenly have no idea what I was doing. I'd either bluff off my entire stack or I'd give up and wonder why I put myself in that position in the first place. I've been playing poker for over 8 years and I coach players to becoming full-time players, and in the last year alone I've made over $400,000 playing some of the toughest live games out there. And I'm going to show you the exact strategy that I use when it comes to ace high boards. And I know what some of you guys are thinking.
Sure, Nelson, that probably works in your games, but in my games that falls apart.
That's exactly why I'm currently dropping down to 5-5, showing in real time how these same ideas work just as well, if not better, against the lineups most of you guys are playing in. By the end of this video, you will stop autopiloting one of the most common boards in poker, start understanding when exactly you are allowed to apply pressure and when you need to slow down, and finally, stop bleeding in spots that you thought were standard. So this is how this video will go down. Firstly, I'm going to show you the most common trap players get into when it comes to ace high boards, dissecting why their thought process is actually flawed. Then I'm going to show you how you should be thinking about ace high boards and how to appropriately apply it to your games. And finally, I'm going to be quizzing you guys on one particular spot to see if you have fully understand how to play ace high boards, because the most important thing about improving in poker isn't just passively listening and hoping you digest all the information. No, it is by actively being able to apply and implement everything that you have learned back into your game. And so if you are able to make the correct decision by the end of this video, you are going to be ready to crush your opponents in your next session. Let's get into it. We're playing 5-5 and the 10 straddle is on. We're in the button and we look down at pocket nines. We open to $30 and only the straddle calls. Flop comes ace, queen, 6, rainbow, and when it checks to us, the biggest trap I see players fall into is they get to these flops and think it must just be a range c-bet. And that is, they think they are allowed to bet with every single hand they arrive here with. And the logic that most people use is that because it's ace high, we have all these strong aces like ace king, ace queen, ace jack as the pre-flop aggressor. And so because of this, we're allowed to bet with every single hand that we show up with. That includes king high, jack high, even 7 high for Christ's sake. And so most people arrive on this flop with pocket nines and are comfortable to throw out a small c-bet, maybe something like $20, thinking that it'll get the job done. But this is wrong. And I'm going to be showing you why this could literally be burning a hole in your pocket every single time you do this. Instead, we should choose a polar strategy. What that means is we reduce the frequency of how often we bet, but when we do bet, we go for a much bigger size. Let's break it down. To fully understand this, you need to first look at what exactly the straddle strategy is when it comes to pre-flop. When we open from the button and it folds to the straddle, they have a lot of incentive to just call here. This is because they are last to act and have already put in $10. There are a lot of hands here that they are happy to just call and see a flop. These include pairs, suited connectors, or offsuit Broadway hands, and furthermore, they don't want to raise their medium strength hands and possibly reopen the action and get 4-bet, which would make their life a lot harder. And so that means the straddle will be playing a polar pre-flop strategy. That is, they will only 3-bet their very best hands like aces, kings, queens, or ace king, or their best bluffs, and call everything in between. And so when we think about hands like ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, does the straddle really want to 3-bet these hands when they could possibly get 4-bet Or they might just make worse hands fold? No, not really. Why would they want to do that when they can comfortably just call pre-flop and have a relatively strong range against the button open, which should be wide? So, with this in mind, when we arrive on this flop, we should appreciate the fact that the straddle can still have a decent amount of ace-x that will not be folding anytime soon. So, what actually happens if we do bet here with pocket nines? Do we get any worse hands to call us? I mean, if the straddle has an underpair like 2s, 3s, 4s, or 5s, they're just going to fold. And if they had a random hand like king 5 suited, they're also just going to fold. And so betting here with pocket nines actually puts you in a situation where you will make a lot of worse hands fold and only get called by better, like queen x or ace x. And that is not a spot we want to be in. And so, sure, you might be saying if we bet here with pocket nines, we can get called by king 10, king jack, or jack 10. But realistically, are we prepared to triple barrel and try get value from these hands when there are so many turns and rivers that will improve their hand? I don't think so. And trust me, I've learned this the hard way. I used to always triple barrel these spots and wonder why I kept getting called down. So what should we do instead? Check back a hand like pocket nines and try get to showdown. The value we have comes from beating underpairs and high card hands, both of which won't bet themselves as they also want to get to showdown. And so it almost becomes like a gentleman's agreement. If it goes check check all the way, we will win a lot of the time. So that's exactly what we do here. We check back with pocket nines. The turn now comes the 8 of clubs bringing in a flush draw, and now this straddle bets out for small, just $30. Ordinarily with pocket nines, we shouldn't just fold to one bet yet because there are still some draws present, and especially for this size. But in this particular game, this opponent is a tight passive player, and I would expect him to never bet here without an ace. So we easily fold here and can move on to the next hand. A couple orbits later in the same game, we're in the low jack and we look down at ace jack offsuit. We open to $30 and only the small blind makes the call. Flop comes ace 2-3 rainbow, and when it checks to us, this time we actually do have the ace. So how should we play? Just like how we established our thought process last hand, we should first take a look at these positions and what type of range the small blind has here. I see a lot of players in these stakes like to flat here from the small blind. Personally, I don't think you should be calling here at all in the small blind, but that topic could be a full video in itself. Let me know in the comments if you guys would like to see me break down exactly why calling in the small blind could literally be the one reason stopping you from going from a break-even player to a winning crusher. But anyway, I can see why players like to do this in these stakes. When we open from early position, we obviously have a tighter range, and so a lot of players are too scared to 3-bet from the small blind against this tight range, but still want to get involved with certain hands. These hands are usually like pocket pairs like 7s or 8s, but also a lot of ace x and king x suited that doesn't want to 3-bet, like ace 9 suited or king 10 suited. And so what does this mean on this flop when we actually do have an ace? Just like our previous analysis, we should adopt a polar betting strategy, and that is reduce how often we bet, but when we do bet, we choose a bigger size. This makes a lot of sense right now because if our opponent did have an ace, which they do have a decent amount of time, they will never be folding. And so we must capitalize on this situation and go for a bigger bet to try and maximize value against these hands. And so what does a bigger bet actually mean? Well, that depends on exactly what type of ace high board you have. On this board in particular, which is an ace low board, because our opponent will have a lot of pocket pairs that won't fold to one bet just yet, we can actually afford to size down a little bit to keep these hands in. But don't be surprised if you see certain ace high boards that would implement a pot size bet or even an overbet strategy. By the way, this is definitely not a hint for your quiz later in the video. So we decide to bet out for $30, which is roughly 40% of the pot, and the small blind makes the call. Now the turn is the ace of diamonds, repeating the ace and also bringing in a flush draw. Small blind checks to us again, and now we can play this turn a few different ways. I don't think we can actually get 3 streets of value now because it is much less likely our opponent has an ace. So we could size up and choose a big bet now on the turn and check back the river, or we could check now and bet big on the river. But with the gut shot draw and flush draws out there, I think it's much better to just bet now. So we size up to 110, looking to get called by a lower ace or any draws, but this time they just let it go. Okay, this is what we've been building up to. This is your final test to see if you can go out into this world and start crushing your games on these ace high boards. So far, I've showed you the logic that you need to understand when it comes to playing ace high boards. I've given you an example of how to play it when you don't have an ace, and also an example of when you do have an ace. Now I'm going to put you to the test. I'm going to give you one more final hand, and it is going to be up to you to decide how you should play this hand if you were in the exact spot. Are you ready? All right, let's go. We're playing 5-5-10 and we're in the cutoff, and we look down at King 8 of clubs. We open to $30 and only the straddle calls. Flop now comes Ace Queen 3 with 2 clubs. The straddle checks to us. And now, before even considering our specific hand, I want to ask you this. What does your specific strategy look like? Are you going to A, range C-bet because we have all the big aces? Or B, polar C-bet because the straddle can still have strong hands that won't fold to a bet? I hope you all chose B, because if not, what the have you been watching for the last 10 minutes? But now let's take a second to think about what our specific hand wants to do. Because when it comes to polar strategies, we need to be able to differentiate what the suitable bluffs are. With the nut flush draw, do you guys think this is a suitable hand to bet big as a bluff on this flop? In my opinion, I believe so. And here is the link that you need to make when considering which hands to bluff. When we have the nut flush draw here, we want to bet big for a few good reasons. Firstly, we want to build the pot. Regardless of what the opponent has, hands that draw to the nuts generally want to bet because when you do hit your draw, you will win a bigger pot than if you were to just check back. Secondly, if our opponent does have a lower flush draw, they're never going to fold to just one bet. This makes them inelastic, meaning we are allowed to bet bigger while keeping them in and possibly coolering them for maximum if the flush does come. Lastly, we are bluffing. I hope it is very clear here that if we bet here with king high, we are intending to make better hands fold. Now, what are these better hands that might fold? Under pairs, they're out of the game for sure. Bigger king high like king jack, king 10 are already in a very tough spot on the flop. Even queen X, while they may not fold on the flop right now, they are not loving life and will definitely consider waving the white flag if we do continue with their second barrel on the turn or river. And so a hand like king 8 of clubs is an excellent hand to fit into this big bet strategy that we will also be betting the same if we did have a hand like ace king. But it is worth noting, we won't be betting here with all our flush draws. A hand like 10-9 of clubs might want to check back simply because we do not have the nut draw and don't want to bloat the pot with a draw that might not even be live. And so it would be much better to check this hand back and realize any equity that we still might have. So this time we go for a bigger bet size and we bet out full pot for $70. This time, this straddle just makes the fold. All right, guys, hopefully you fully understand now how exactly you need to be playing ace high boards and start implementing this into your game right now. I hope this video helps you start crushing your tables on one of the most common flops you will ever see. Thank you guys so much for watching and have a great day.